Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The House of Representatives has voted in the positive for the debt deal announced by the President of the United States and the leaders of Congress 24 hours ago, some 14 hours ago. The House, the more difficult of the two bodies to predict, voted sizably in favor of the debt deal, despite the reservations of both sides, both the Democrats and the Republicans, and then the fragments within the party. We will address that right away. John Avlon of CNN and the Daily Beast, he also writes for Newsweek. Daily Beast and Newsweek tend to fit together very neatly, is here as my colleague and co-host. Good evening, Mr. Avlon.
Good evening, John.
We've had a weekend of contretemps and unity, and that's a good thing.
It's been high-stakes poker with apparently a happy ending.
And we're also joined this evening by Melik Kalin, who writes for Newsweek International and for the Wall Street Journal. Melik is here because there is a crisis, a house on fire, a catastrophe going on in the Ummah, especially in Syria, and we will address that in due time because of the massacre we believe is underway by a man who has been identified as a villain by the President of the United States. That's the Assad regime in Damascus. Melik, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thank you, Melik. And we're going to get to Syria right away because it's on fire, but we must deal with the domestic happiness that we're going to strike tonight. And we're joined by presidential candidate Thaddeus McCotter for the nomination process of the Republican Party. But right now, he's a member of Congress. Over this last week, Mr. McCotter, who represents 11th Michigan, that's Livonia, that's Western Detroit, has been in the thick of the contest in Washington, running back and forth between the leadership and the members. And Congressman, a very good evening to you. Thank you for this. Do I say correctly that you voted in the affirmative for the debt deal this afternoon? Good evening, Congressman.
Good evening, John. Yes, that's absolutely true. As you know, throughout the process, I supported moving it forward because we knew what the stakes were for the country, for our financial credibility in the world. And today, this morning, I was unhappy with the framework that was announced last night. And so, fortunately, after airing those views as publicly as I could, I was able to bring my concerns to Speaker Boehner, who shared them. He addressed them. And I was comfortable to vote for a bill that I think was imperative and imperfect, granted. First step towards restoring fiscal sanity in Washington.
Over the weekend, Congressman, you were in the news calling for unity between the Republican Party and the Republican Party. That would be the Tea Party and the GOP. I think the paraphrase of your quote was, you want the Tea Party to grow up and you want the Republican Party, the GOP, to wake up. Is that accurate?
Well, that's accurate, John, and the way I said it, what happens is it'll upset some people, but you have to tell your friends the truth for their own good and for your good. So when you think about it, you're a Sun Tzu fan. When your opponent is united and you and your friends are divided, you are defeated. And what we saw throughout the course of the debt ceiling debate was in many ways you saw good Republicans that are very, very conservative on the basis of one vote being, quote-unquote, targeted for purging out of the party. And so consequently, what you need is for the Tea Party to avoid being marginalized, is to be realistic at their goals and look at people over the long term and how the ball moves down the field. Now, in fairness, the Republican Party has to realize that they cannot simply manage the Tea Party. It's a separate entity, and they have to communicate with it. But in the end, if they allow themselves to be caught up in internecine battles all the time, the only people that are going to be happy are those who have views antithetical to both the Tea Party and the Republican Party.
That is, I appreciate you calling for unity. I think it's an important thing to say, and it's a great soundbite. You know, grow up, wake up. What was the response to your attempt at trying to preach a larger unity?
Mixed, I think would be the kindest way to put it. But you know, you expect that. I mean, it's not going to be something that's going to be necessarily readily embraced by people. I mean, I've been in that position myself, you know. But what happens is, as things calm down, now that we've got the legislation passed over to the Senate and people can look at it and make their own determinations, they'll be able to also consider where and how we can best facilitate cooperation between those two distinct entities, the Tea Party and the Republican Party, heading into what will be a very eventful fall heading into next year.
Of note, Congressman, you voted for the Boehner plan last week. You voted yes in support of the Speaker's plan to move this story, and the success today, 269 to 161, shows the Boehner plan stood up. However, you were notable among the Republican candidates for the nomination. Michelle Bachmann voted no twice, and I believe Ron Paul of Texas voted no twice. And today we have Mitt Romney saying no to the final debt deal. Other candidates have all voted either negative or spoken negatively. So you stand out, Congressman. Is this a problem on the campaign trail that you voted yes with the leadership and with the Republican Party?
Well, John, I voted for the country, as I view it. Look, I've often said, you've heard me say it before on your show, we are right now, in my mind, being neither led nor governed by this administration. And I think that what the American people want in a very chaotic time are people who are prepared to make tough decisions and govern. And if you have any hint about pandering to you, if you have any hint about the unwillingness to actually make those difficult decisions, then you're not going to be worthy of holding the office of the President of the United States and getting us to a better tomorrow through this turbulent time.
What lessons, Congressman, do you think Speaker Boehner has taken from his difficulty at the end of the day in corralling these votes? It seems to me that there's going to be some scar tissue.
Well, I think that for Speaker Boehner, who has a vastly different approach than, say, some of his predecessors or some of our predecessors in whip positions, is that Speaker Boehner tries to lead by consensus. Now, in my own experience with John, is we know each other well enough and we've been through enough battles that he'll lay out the facts and let me make up my own mind, and I know that he does that with other individuals. And if you think about some of the things that we've been through, is that had there been a heavier hand utilized in some of the earlier votes, I don't think that this would have been as overwhelmingly passed as it was. So in many ways, what people perceive as a weakness of Boehner's is lack of the iron fist is actually, I think, in this instance, the perfect approach that allowed members to come to their own conclusions. There was a little prodding in some cases, but there was never the threat of purge or being ostracized within the caucus.
Which I think is refreshing and genuinely good on Speaker Boehner for taking that approach. In some ways, the grand bargain that was once dreamed of was kicked down to this new special committee. The devil's in the details here, obviously. But what are you hearing about some of the folks who might be appointed to this? And then subsequently, do you think, anyone who's serious about dealing with the deficit and debt knows you have to have entitlement reform and tax reform. Do you think that it's possible that this group will be able to put something forward building on the previous proposals of, say, the Bowles-Simpson Commission?
Well, I think it's possible. It's going to depend on the individuals, as you rightly point out, John, on who gets put on. We've shown in the House Republicans that we're serious about this. We showed it with the Ryan budget. I think a lot of people would be pleasantly happy to hear that Paul's put on there, and I think it's a natural. Now, who else goes on there, I don't know, and who the Democrats are going to put on, I don't know. But the reality is House Republicans have shown a willingness to engage in this entitlement reform debate, and we continue to stand behind that, and we continue to look for ways to solve that long-term fiscal problem in the United States. In terms of how it's going to play out, these were the concerns that I had, and the speakers assured me that it did not take much in this sense, that the Republican Party is not going to raise taxes in a recessed economy and make it harder for the entrepreneurs and workers to grow us out of the stagnation in which the Obama administration put us. I think that we also have the issue of making sure, and it was one of the key considerations for me, is to avoid sequestration at all costs and to further expand, which was done in the bill itself, the definition of defense to not simply target the military should a sequestration occur.
Congressman Thaddeus McCotter, 11th Michigan, a candidate for the Republican nomination for president for the year 2012, voting yes for the Boehner plan last week in contrariness to the flow of the Tea Party last week and also to his rival candidates who voted. Michelle Bachmann voted no last week, and so did Ron Paul, and voting yes again today for the 269 to 161 victory for the debt deal put together by the leaders. Michelle Bachmann voted no. Ron Paul voted no. Congressman Thaddeus yes McCotter. John Avlon of CNN, Newsweek, and the Daily Beast. I'm John Batchelor.